We really appreciate it, and I'm going to turn it over to my 10-year-old son, Will, who's going to introduce Senator Duckworth.
Just look at one person.
Yeah, one person. Don't look at your brother.
Tammy Duckworth is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel. She was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 2013. In 2016, she was elected to the United States Senate, defeating Republican Senator Mark Kirk. She is one of just 100 senators in our country. Senator Duckworth was the first member of Congress born in Thailand. She will be the first senator in our country's history to have a baby while in office. But most of all, she is a veteran who served our country as a U.S. Army helicopter pilot during the Iraq War. She was one of the first women to fly combat missions. On November 12, 2004, her Black Hawk helicopter was hit by an RPG, and she lost her legs and partial use of her right arm. And yet, she never gave up. She received a Purple Heart. She is courageous, and she fought to protect our freedom. Please welcome an American hero, Tammy Duckworth.
Thank you. Isn't he great?
Watch your job. Watch
my job. Yeah. I got a couple years. I'm good. It is so great to be here. I'm so happy to be back home. We were stuck with another very short government shutdown on Thursday night, which was just stupid. Stupid. I thought I was on the phone while Annie was talking, not because I was rude and a millennial, which I'm not. But I wanted to give you a quick rundown of what we passed so that you would know what we got in this deal and why we voted for it and why I voted for it. I wish that we could have fixed the issue with Dreamers, and I'm going to continue to work on that. But it's what we were able to get Republicans to agree to is pretty historic. And it was truly bipartisan between Democrats and Republicans, and especially us moderates working together. And in the U.S. Senate, what we're seeing right now is a lot of Midwestern senators coming together to work with each other. So for example, at the 63-day mark, I passed my first piece of legislation that got signed into law with Todd Young from Indiana. He's also a former U.S. Marine, just a great guy, but it has to do with transportation issue, which is something I'm really focused on. And it's as fast as any two senators, he and I to combine, have passed legislation since the 1970s. Other crazy partisan stuff that goes on, know that we're working together, and a lot of us Midwesterners are working together. I'm doing a lot with Joni Ernst, another vet. There's a common theme there. And Chuck Grassley on stuff that has to do with locks and dams on the Mississippi and ag policy. So some of those things. But this is what's in the bill. It repeals sequestration for 2 years. Sequestration is this artificial cap we put on the budget that said it can't grow more than a certain amount. But we were getting around it for the Department of Defense by creating a special, I always called it a slush fund, called the Overseas Contingency Fund. And we were putting $90 billion into this to allow the Department of Defense to get around the caps, which it needed to do because we've got troops in Afghanistan, Iraq. Now they're talking about sending troops into Syria. These guys don't even have all the munitions they need to do their jobs. So we needed to do that. I didn't like the use of those funds because you can't use those funds for things like training. So for example, the Army is short 1,000 pilots because that money can only be used for overseas operation, can't be used for training back here at home. Can't be used for fixing equipment that's back here at home. Only about 30% of the Marine Corps' entire fleet of aircraft is actually fully operational right now. So I mean, think about it. You know, so that was going on. But in the meantime, we were keeping a lid on spending for education, community health centers, for transportation, infrastructure investments, fixing our roads, our bridges, all of those things. So this bill actually lifts the sequestration cap for 2 years on both defense and non-defense. So we're taking care of our military, and we're taking care of public schools. Here are some of the things. It extends the childhood health insurance program for kids to 10 years. So kids' health insurance. By spending it 10 years, it actually saves taxpayers $6 billion.
Okay.
It reauthorizes $7 billion in total funding for community health centers, which are centers for low-income but also rural areas. It provides funding to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, $15 billion, so that they can fix things like floodplains and do mitigation and locks and dams in the Mississippi. $1 billion for dairy farmers, $20 billion for infrastructure. And this is critical, especially for mayors, former mayors, because this is money that will come into small towns all across the country. It's not just going to go to Chicago or New York or places like that. And $20 billion will go for rural water, wastewater, clean and safe drinking water, getting lead out of the water supply. One that was very close to my heart, $4 billion to rebuild and improve VA facilities for our vets. $6 billion for the fight against the opioid epidemic. And among other things, $4 billion for programs that help make college more affordable, especially making college more affordable for people who are police officers, teachers, and firefighters, and for their children. There's a lot of compromise that had to happen, but I was proud to be able to vote for it. Now we're going to go back and we're going to push hard for Dreamers. But I thought it was important. I'm committed to getting the 6 for Dreamers before they start getting deported, but I also didn't think that it was right to hold all of these other things in the country hostage, in a way, for Dreamers. And it shouldn't even be a choice. We can do both. You know, we're a wealthy nation, and we can do this, and we can find ways to save money. And the Pentagon is right now having to go through an audit for the first time ever. The Pentagon has never passed an audit, ever. Can you imagine any business owners in here? Can you imagine being a business owner or an accountant and to think that your business has never gone through an audit?
Be all right, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they just, as part of this audit, they just came out and said that the Defense Logistics Agency doesn't know where it spent $218 million. They can't account for it, and they don't know where it went. I'm like, nobody kept receipts. You know? So we'll keep working on it. But the fight starts here, at home, in our towns, in our kids' schools, in our VA facilities. All the things that we have to stand up and fight for starts here. I can do as much as I can in Washington. Dick and I are, you know, we're partners, and we fight hard together and try to get as much money back here to Illinois as possible. But where we need help is with things like the state government, for example. You know, I can't bring in federal dollars if we don't actually pass a state budget and actually appropriate the right amount of money. And in fact, we've lost out on funding from the federal government for the, I'll give you an example. Outside of Chicagoland, I got funding for a new veterans home in the Chicagoland area. And the federal government provides 70% of that money, and the state only has to come up with 30%. Well, Governor Rauner took that money back after it had been appropriated, after everybody had voted on it and said that it would be there, and now we're not building that veterans home in the Chicago area. And so we lost out on all of that, you know, something literally $60 million of federal dollars to build a much needed veterans home. And this is happening all over. It's happening with the bridges here, it's happening with the roads here, anything that requires a state match, and it's usually 70-30. If you can't get the state to function properly, we can't get the federal dollars. And you know what happens to that money? It goes somewhere else. It goes to some other state. It goes to some other state. It never comes back here. So we can't get money for new fire trucks, and we can't get money for schools and things like that because there's a requirement for a state match. And so those are the kinds of things where it's really important for me to have a good partner that I can work with all across the state in Springfield, because then we can come together and figure out ways to get money into the state, into the local economies. And this money that's going to be there for infrastructure, there'll be a fight for this money across the country. And that's not a lot of money for infrastructure. We need $1 trillion at least in investment in infrastructure. The American Society of Civil Engineers has rated the infrastructure in this country at a D-. At a D-. There are literally tens of thousands of bridges in this country that have been rated as substandard, but okay for temporary travel, including some in this county. And you probably know where they are. You can probably take me on a tour of exactly where they are. Yeah, you can take me on a tour of where they are. And we need $1 trillion just to bring it up to a C grade. And if we want to compete with the Chinese, the Germans, the Japanese, the South Koreans, because they're putting this money into their infrastructure, we need at least another $1 trillion on top of that, so that we are into the 21st century level of our infrastructure. And this doesn't just mean roads and rail and bridges, it's also public schools, it's also broadband. You know, we should have in all of our communities the fastest internet speeds so that we can compete. You're not going to ever get a business to come in and into a community that's not, you know, a major, that does not have the broadband. This is a utility. It's not a luxury, and we need this. We have, I don't think it's here in Macomb County, but in other counties, especially further south here in Illinois, we have places where kids can't do their homework because they don't have broadband access. So they can't even go online to do their homework. And those are the things we need to put money into. But if we don't have our act together at the state to apply for these grants, that money will disappear to North Dakota, to Georgia, to any other state, and we won't get it here in Illinois. And you will continue to be people who pay taxes, more into federal taxes than you ever get back from the federal government. We pay out in Illinois on average, for every dollar that we pay in federal taxes, a citizen living in Illinois only gets back 70 cents on the dollar of what we put into the federal government. If you live in Georgia or Alabama, you actually get back $2 for every dollar that you pay.
Wow.
So we lose out. We're a net donor state, and we have to fix that, and we have to fight to get that money back. And that's what Dick and I try to do every single day. But what's great is that we have a lot of bipartisan work that's going on, both here in the state and in Washington, where we can make this happen. And I'm just really so pleased to get to be here. And I think we have a little time. Do you want to do some questions and answers between the two of us?
Sure.
I think we'll do some questions and answers, and just to let you guys know, you know, it's really great. I can't believe this turnout. This is like a Saturday night party or something. Saturday morning. I'm so impressed. So
The broadband, so important. Only reason I know